The conference room inside the Rayburn House office building was colder than usual, not in temperature, but in tone. The kind of chill that sets in when two people with wildly different philosophies are about to speak, and neither plans to blink first. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat quietly, flipping through her briefing notes. She wore a deep burgundy blazer, minimal jewelry, and that familiar calm that signaled not submission, but control. She wasn't just ready, she was waiting. Across from her, entrepreneur turned political firebrand Vivek Ramaswamy sat back in his leather chair, legs slightly spread, fingertips steepled. He wore confidence like cologne, thick, intentional, and meant to fill the room. His smirk wasn't for Jasmine, not directly. It was for the cameras, the headlines he'd already imagined. The hearing was titled Technology, Free Speech, and National Unity. But those in the room knew that had little to do with what was coming. This wasn't a policy meeting. It was a collision course. The chairwoman cleared her throat. We'll now hear perspectives on platform accountability in the digital age. Mr. Ramaswamy, you have the floor. Vivek leaned forward like a professor addressing an underperforming class. We've created a culture, he said, where people are rewarded for victimhood, where truth is sacrificed at the altar of feelings. Social media doesn't suppress voices, it amplifies the wrong ones. He turned slightly toward Jasmine. And frankly, some of us have made careers out of stoking division instead of solving problems. There it was. No names, but no doubt either. A low murmur traveled across the press row. Jasmine didn't react. Not yet. I'm not saying we shouldn't listen to underrepresented voices, Vivek continued. But when the loudest person in the room always claims moral authority, we lose the ability to have real, data-driven conversation. A pause. Then the smirk. He folded his hands. That's all. The chairwoman nodded. Congresswoman Crockett? Jasmine didn't move for a second. Then calmly she straightened her spine and tapped her mic. I've been listening, she said. Her voice was low but firm, her southern cadence measured like a courtroom argument. And I want to start with something simple. I don't mind disagreement. What I mind is dismissal. The room got quieter. I represent communities where speech isn't just free, it's survival. And when someone smirks while calling us loud or broken or divisive, I don't see a truth teller. I see someone who's never had to raise their voice just to be heard. She looked directly at Vivek. And that's not data, that's lived reality. He stopped smirking. He smirked. Jasmine spoke. And the whole room went silent. Vivek wasn't ready. For a second, Vivek didn't speak. Neither did anyone else. That silence, the kind that follows truth before someone tries to change the subject, hung in the air. Jasmine let it linger. She had learned early on that stillness could say more than shouting. She turned a page in her binder, eyes never leaving him. You talk about victimhood, she said, voice calm, like it's a performance. But some of us don't get to choose when we're victims. We're just busy surviving systems we didn't build, but that were built to ignore us. One of the younger aides in the back row shifted forward in his seat, pen frozen mid-sentence. I didn't come here to represent loud voices, Jasmine continued. I came because people in my district have been locked out of rooms like this for decades. And when they finally get in, what do they get called? Too angry, too emotional, too much. She smiled, not warmly. That's code, and we both know it. Vivek sat upright now, arms crossed in front of him. His smirk had thinned. Jasmine's voice remained steady. You speak the language of numbers. That's fine. I brought numbers too. Let's talk about who's most likely to be banned or shadow banned on social platforms, not for hate speech, but for calling out inequality. She held up a printout of a recent MIT study. You know who gets flagged the fastest? Not extremists, not disinfo bots, but Black women activists, the ones posting about eviction courts, about healthcare deserts, about food lines and zip codes nobody in this room's ever driven through. She turned again to the chair. With respect, this hearing isn't about free speech. It's about who gets heard and who gets erased. That line shifted something. People stopped checking their phones. Reporters started typing faster. Even the committee members who'd come in with half-written questions began to look up. Jasmine glanced again at Vivek. "You think it's brave to say the quiet part out loud?" she asked softly. "Try saying the uncomfortable part in a room full of people waiting for you to fail." Vivek leaned toward his mic, finally. "With all due respect," he said, tone clipped, "I'm not dismissing anyone. I'm just saying maybe we should focus less on identity and more on solutions." Jasmine didn't blink. "Then maybe stop pretending identity and inequality aren't connected." Boom. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but the force behind it made everyone sit straighter. This wasn't a debate, it was a reckoning. And Vivek, he wasn't ready. He smirked. Jasmine spoke, and the whole room went silent. Vivek wasn't ready. Jasmine Crockett didn't come from think tanks. She didn't grow up quoting market theories or debating Twitter bans over lattes. She came from a neighborhood where eviction notices came faster than job offers, and where free speech meant speaking fast before the bus pulled off. She took a breath, and for a moment, she wasn't just a congresswoman in a tailored blazer. She was Jasmine, the teenager watching her mom tape up a cracked window with plastic wrap and prayer. The public defender walking into courtrooms where poor black mothers were charged with trespassing for sleeping in abandoned houses with their children. The girl who learned early that silence never saved anyone. So she leaned in. "You say we need to focus on solutions," Jasmine said, turning toward Vivek again. "Let me offer one." She lifted a document, a local housing initiative she co-sponsored. It funds wraparound support services, expands digital access for low-income neighborhoods, and creates job pipelines in districts written off as too difficult to fix. She slid it toward him. "You ever been to Pleasant Grove, Mr. Ramaswamy? That's a neighborhood in my district. Median income, $29,000. Grocery store? Closest one is 3 miles away. But there's a liquor store on every block." She paused, her voice lowering just enough to force people to lean in. "You think people choose chaos? No, sir. They adapt to abandonment." Vivek stiffened. The cameras caught it. His smile hadn't returned. Jasmine continued, steady as steel. "We keep asking communities to pull themselves up, but we don't talk about how we cut the ladder. Then we blame them for not climbing." A senator 2 seats over whispered something to an aide. One of the committee members checked the notes in front of him, clearly reading for the first time. "I'm not here for applause," she added. "I'm here because I was one rent increase away from silence once, I remember." Now she locked eyes with Vivek. "I don't need you to agree with my solutions, but I won't let you pretend the problem is noise, when the real problem is neglect." Vivek shifted in his seat. And the room? Still silent. He smirked. Jasmine spoke. And the whole room went silent. Vivek wasn't ready. The stillness in the room wasn't submission. It was calculation. People were trying to figure out if what they just heard was a speech or a shift. Vivek Ramaswamy didn't stay quiet long. He leaned forward again, voice clipped, sharper now. "I'm not questioning your passion, Congresswoman. But let's not confuse passion with progress. The problems you described, liquor stores on every corner, abandoned neighborhoods, those aren't new. And they didn't appear because tech companies suppressed hashtags," some staffers murmured. It was a pivot, but a practiced one. Vivek continued, tapping a pen against his notepad. "What I'm saying is, when we make everything about race or identity, we limit our ability to talk about universal truths. Poverty, crime, failing schools, they exist in rural America too. Shouldn't we be finding what unites us, instead of doubling down on differences?" He leaned back, with that familiar smirk returning, subtle, smug, waiting for applause that didn't come. Jasmine sat perfectly still. Then, slowly, she reached for the mic again. "You know what's funny?" she said quietly. "I've been in this room for years, and somehow, it's always the same script. Let's talk unity when the marginalized speak. Let's talk common ground when someone brings up race. Let's talk tone, never truth. The smirk faded, not all at once, but enough to notice. You say rural poverty matters? I agree. That's why I voted for bills that fund infrastructure in Appalachia, broadband in farm towns, mobile clinics for veterans in counties that never see national news. She tilted her head. But when we ask the same support for black and brown communities, suddenly we're playing the race card. The tension in the room shifted, again. I'm not interested in selective unity, Mr. Ramaswamy. I'm interested in shared responsibility. A pause, then she asked, "Tell me something. How many times have you walked through a housing project where the elevator hasn't worked in 6 months? Where mold grows faster than opportunity? How many times have you sat with someone who lost their kid, not to violence, but to asthma, because their zip code had no clean air?" Vivek didn't answer. Not right away, because in that moment there was no answer that didn't expose the gap. Jasmine leaned back, her voice now level, almost gentle. "If we're going to talk about truth, let's not start by dismissing mine." And for the first time, the smirk was gone for good. He smirked. Jasmine spoke, and the whole room went silent. Vivek wasn't ready. By now, the energy in the room had shifted completely. What started as a routine hearing had turned into something else. A reckoning, a mirror, a microphone aimed not just at policy but at principle. Even the committee chair leaned forward now, elbows on the desk, eyes locked not on Vivek but on Jasmine. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence was doing the work. "I don't speak from theory," Jasmine said, flipping to a page in her binder. "I speak from courtrooms, food pantries, hospital waiting rooms, places most policy writers never step foot in." She held up a photo. No drama, just a real image. A woman named Cherie from South Oak Cliff, standing outside her apartment with a stroller, beside a trash heap that hadn't been collected in 2 weeks. "She called my office every day for a month, not for attention, for action." She slid the photo forward. "This is what gets ignored when we call real voices divisive." Vivek exhaled slowly, but not to interrupt, just to recenter. But Jasmine wasn't done. "I read your book, Mr. Ramaswamy," she said suddenly. "Nation of Victims, right?" He blinked. "Yes." "You wrote that people use oppression as currency," she continued. "You said the American dream is being held hostage by grievance." Now she leaned forward, her voice precise. "But you know what holds people hostage in my district? Rent that's 70% of their paycheck. Kids with asthma who can't afford inhalers. Public schools built before the Civil Rights Act and never once renovated. That's not grievance. That's reality." She tapped the table gently. "And the dream you write about? We're still waiting to wake up to it." Even the stenographer paused her fingers for a beat, eyes briefly lifting. Vivek adjusted in his seat again, clearing his throat. "I don't deny the problems," he said carefully. "But blaming the system over and over, doesn't that disempower people? Doesn't that teach them they're helpless?" Jasmine tilted her head slightly, that same courtroom calm, now razor sharp. "No," she said. "What disempowers people is pretending the system doesn't exist." Silence. It was the kind that wasn't empty. It was full. Full of truth, memory, weight. And when Jasmine finally looked away from Vivek and back toward the room, she wasn't just addressing him anymore. She was speaking to everyone who had ever been told to wait their turn, to lower their voice, to smile and nod while being erased. The turning point wasn't just rhetorical, it was emotional and irreversible. He smirked. Jasmine spoke, and the whole room went silent. Vivek wasn't ready. The hearing wasn't over. But outside those wood-paneled walls, the internet had already declared a verdict. Somewhere in the back of the room, an intern, barely 22, still learning how to properly thread a lapel mic, had clipped a 47-second video of Jasmine's final line. "What disempowers people is pretending the system doesn't exist." No dramatic cutaways, no music, just her voice, level, undeniable. By the time Vivek Ramaswamy finished his closing remarks, the clip had already passed 500,000 views. Back in the hearing room, he didn't know it yet. Neither did Jasmine, but the outside world had stopped scrolling. TikTok stitched it first. Users in hoodies and school hallways whispered, "Say that again," before replaying the clip with solemn nods. Twitter, always quicker with the sarcasm, lit up with captions like, "Vivek brought a TED Talk, Jasmine brought the receipts." That wasn't a response, that was a re-education. By lunch, hashtags were trending. Crockett clapped back. Silence in the room. She said it news anchors were scrambling. Most networks hadn't sent cameras. It was supposed to be a procedural hearing, but by 4 p.m., primetime bookings had begun. Still, Jasmine hadn't checked her phone. She was in a debrief with staff, calmly reviewing transcripts, not trending tabs. Devin, her media advisor, burst into the room holding his tablet. "Boss," he said breathlessly, "you just passed 2 million views. They're calling it the mic drop moment of the year." Jasmine looked up, unfazed. "That's nice," she said. "But did the housing subcommittee return our amendment draft?" Devin blinked. "Not yet." "Then let's stay focused." Because that was the thing about Jasmine Crockett. She didn't perform for clips, she testified for people. But that didn't stop the momentum. That night, as pundits debated whether her tone was too direct or exactly what Congress needed, people in Dallas, Detroit, and Des Moines replayed her words in silence. Not because they were shocked, but because they felt seen. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like background noise. It felt like something might actually change. He smirked. Jasmine spoke, and the whole room went silent. Vivek wasn't ready. The following morning, Jasmine's office phone didn't stop ringing. Not from lobbyists, not from networks, but from people. A grandmother in rural Alabama left a voicemail through tears. "I ain't got Twitter, but I saw you on the news. You said what I've been trying to say for 20 years. A school teacher from East St. Louis wrote, "My students watched your clip in class." One of them said, "That's what my mom always tells me, but no one listens to her." You made them feel powerful. What caught Jasmine off guard wasn't the quantity of messages. It was where they were coming from. Appalachia, Fresno, Portsmouth, Ohio. Places politicians fly over but rarely remember. And it wasn't just black and brown families. It was white working-class parents, veterans, factory workers. One message stood out. A man named Ronnie from West Virginia. He wrote, "I don't agree with you on everything, but when you said poverty's not a moral failure, I felt that. My wife cried. No politician ever said that before." Jasmine read it 3 times, because that was the point, not to win a fight, but to break the script. She sat down with her team. Printed voicemails were tacked on the wall. Handwritten letters from teens in rural towns were being sorted in piles. Devin looked over, eyes wide. "We've never had this kind of response." Jasmine stayed quiet. Then she finally said, "This isn't about going viral. This is about validation. People are tired of being data points in someone else's argument." She picked up one letter, carefully folded in blue-lined notebook paper. It read, "I thought we were invisible until you spoke." And that's when she made a decision. "We're not waiting," she said. "Draft the follow-up bill. I want it on housing, broadband access, and eviction protections. But this time," she looked up, "make it bipartisan. I want their voices in this too. Because when the forgotten started seeing each other across state lines, across race lines, across partisan lines, that's when something real could begin." He smirked. Jasmine spoke, and the whole room went silent. Vivek wasn't ready. A week passed. The headlines began to fade, as they always do. A tech CEO made a scandalous comment. A senator tripped over a hot mic. The internet moved on. But for the people who really listened to what Jasmine Crockett had said that day, something had stuck. It didn't trend anymore. It resonated. A community organizer in East Kentucky said it best during a town hall. "She didn't come for applause. She came to remind us we ain't alone." And Jasmine? She was back in Dallas. No cameras, no press, just folding chairs in a community center and a stack of flyers about rental assistance. At the end of the session, an older man in a worn leather jacket raised his hand. He didn't ask about policy. He asked, "Do they really listen when you talk like that up there?" The room fell quiet, waiting for her answer. Jasmine looked around, at the single moms holding babies on their laps, at the teen who came straight from his night shift, at the pastor taking notes in the back row with a ballpoint pen and a borrowed clipboard. She smiled softly. "Not always," she said, "but I don't speak to make them comfortable. I speak so y'all don't feel invisible." It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't political. It was truth. That moment meant more to her than any trending tag, because representation isn't about going viral. It's about being remembered by the people who matter most. And in neighborhoods like hers, and towns like Ronnie's, that memory was already taking root. A week later, the new bipartisan housing bill she had promised was drafted. It had rural co-sponsors, urban ones. Voices that had never shared space before were suddenly finishing each other's sentences. Because what Jasmine Crockett had done in that room wasn't just challenge Vivek Ramaswamy, she challenged the country to stop dividing poverty into categories, to stop pitting pain against pain, to stop deciding who deserves help based on zip code or skin tone, and to finally ask, what would happen if the people at the bottom stopped fighting each other and started demanding better together? She didn't shout it. She didn't spin it. She just said it. And in a world drowning in noise, that kind of clarity, it echoed. Sometimes power doesn't come from shouting the loudest. It comes from speaking when it's hardest, from saying what others are too afraid to name. Jasmine Crockett didn't change the world with one speech, but she reminded us that the truth still matters, that poverty isn't a failure of character, that justice doesn't start in a courtroom. It starts when someone finally says, "I see you. I hear you. You matter." So if this story meant something to you, don't just scroll past it. Share it. Talk about it. Ask the hard questions. Because silence has never saved anyone. And maybe, just maybe, speaking up is how we start to change everything.